Necrozma, a sinister, almost outright evil Pokemon that acts as the major antagonist in the Alola region. It is known as the Pillager of Light, as it steals light from entire dimensions to hoard it for itself. Except none of that is actually true. The truth about Necrozma is actually much more obscure than you might think, and as a result, I think almost every Pokemon fan misunderstands this Pokemon. So today, we're going in deep on Necrozma, its actions, and everything else there is to know about it. The idea that Necrozma is inherently evil mainly comes from accounts of encounters with the Pokemon from the people of Ultramegalopolis as well as the Alolan royal family. According to the people of Ultramegalopolis, Necrozma is the reason their planet doesn't have light, and that they want to defeat it in order to regain the light it stole from them. While it is technically true that Necrozma stole the light from their world, it is not the whole truth, as it omits the reason that Necrozma steals light from different planets and dimensions. See, a few hundred years before the events of Sun and Moon, Necrozma was a benevolent being of incredible power. It would travel from dimension to dimension, spreading the light it had to planets bathed in darkness. Necrozma is able to do this because its body allows it to generate infinite light. It was from this light that Z crystals would form, raining down on the worlds that it visited. The aura that the totem Pokemon exude is also a manifestation of Necrozma's light, and it is that very same light that illuminates ultra space and brings life to the planets it visits. In many ways, it was considered a godly Pokemon that could easily traverse ultra space and essentially do as it pleases, and as such, it was given the title of the Blinding One. That is, until it arrived in Ultramegalopolis. On a visit to Ultramegalopolis, it was captured by some of the residents of the city and was forced to become the city's source of light. While it was held captive, Ultramegalopolans conducted experiments and tortured Necrozma in an attempt to steal its light and its power, so they could use it for themselves. Their greed would ultimately lead to Necrozma being permanently damaged and forever leaking the light it had. This reduced it to the form we see in Sun and Moon, often considered base Necrozma, even though it's really like negative strength Necrozma. If you're wondering how Necrozma went from this to this, the black form is actually a reconstruction of Ultra Necrozma's body. In the black body, we can find a number of its original body parts, like its head, which became its torso, its tail, which became its head, its legs, which attached improperly as they are backwards at the knees, its wings, which are shrunk down dramatically, and its legs, which became its arms. It's basically a completely twisted deformation of its original body, with one piece remaining unchanged: the brain prism, which is essentially the brain Necrozma has no matter what form it's in. It's kind of like the operating system for a computer, I think. I don't know, I'm not a computer. The brain prism is present in every form of Necrozma there is, and interestingly, it seems that the base color changes as it absorbs more light, as the prism is almost completely dark when it's inside injured Necrozma, but then, right before it transforms into Ultra Necrozma, we see it fully lit. Interestingly, it seems there are also conditions that must be met in order to fill the brain prism with light, as we only see it full after Necrozma takes control of Solgaleo or Lunala and also steals the light from a region. It seems that it needs another light-based Pokemon such as Solgaleo or Lunala, who obviously represent the sun and moon and the light associated with them, in order to use the brain prism properly, as without the other Pokemon, we can assume Necrozma will just return to its base form rather quickly as the light will leak out. This insinuates the other members of the light trio are able to hold light in the same way Necrozma used to be able to, which would explain why it needs to take over one of them in order to return to its true form. Necrozma might also need the power of a Z crystal to return to its true form after its injury, but it is a bit unclear, as the first time we see it as a boss, it does not hold the Ultra Necrozmium Z crystal, at least as far as I can tell. But every time we, the player, want to transform it, Ultra Necrozmium is required. Realistically, this is probably solely because they needed some way to transform Necrozma in battle in the games, so it might not actually be needed to transform. Maybe it's needed when it's being used by a trainer or something? I don't know, I'm not a Z crystal. Even this does not return Necrozma to its true form forever though, as once a battle ends, it reverts to its Solgaleo or Lunala form and cannot transform outside of battle. But I'm getting off topic, sorry, Necrozma's biology just fascinates me. Anyway, due to the intense agony it was experiencing after the torture at Ultramegalopolis, Necrozma went mad and stole the light from Ultramegalopolis in an attempt to return to its true form, but it wasn't enough light to restore it, so it fled to another world through an ultra wormhole to do the same. But this still wouldn't be enough, because its injury wouldn't stop leaking the light that it absorbed. Eventually, it would arrive in Alola and attempt to steal the region's light as well, but it was beaten back by the Tapus, Solgaleo or Lunala, and a trainer. This defeat further injured Necrozma and is how the sparkling stones were created. This is all to say that Necrozma's actions are not out of a malevolent nature, but are the result of the Pokemon trying to end its own pain and suffering by returning to its true form. The form of a god, the form of the Blinding One. So it's not an evil Pokemon by nature, it has been permanently injured by the greed of others, and its actions are an attempt to fix that. It is a sad situation, but does this justify Necrozma's actions? Does this justify stealing light from planets, essentially dooming them to become barren? Does it justify Necrozma forcibly possessing Solgaleo or Lunala, overriding their will to enforce its own? Does it justify releasing Ultra Beasts on Alola, terrorizing so many innocent people while simultaneously attempting to take the region's light? These are all vile things to do, but does the reason behind them make it okay? It's not like it wants to steal light or hurt people, but does Necrozma ending its own suffering justify all the suffering it has caused, when the suffering it caused is on such an enormous scale? Morality in the Pokemon world is quite a bit different from our own. On one hand, the people of the Pokemon world seem to be, overall, much more caring and interested in helping people than the people of our world. I mean, how many times have you walked into a stranger's house and left with a helpful item? When I do that, they usually just call the cops. The people of the Pokemon world also seem to care a lot more about animals and respecting the environment. They are all around a more responsible and respectful society than what we have here. But at the same time, every region on Earth, except Paldea, seems to have a massive problem with organized crime, with many of these organizations wanting to outright destroy the world. And there do seem to be some evil Pokemon out there as well, since there are Pokemon that can curse you for 1,000 years, and Pokemon that can eat your soul. And let's not forget, the gods of the Pokemon world can literally be controlled by a 10-year-old. It's obviously a very different world from the one we live in, but I think it's fair to say that the Pokemon world is kind of a world of extremes. Both extreme kindness and extreme evil exist plentifully within its bounds. Plus, let's not forget, it is a video game, right? Like, there are so many things that only happen in the Pokemon world because it specifically isn't the real world. So video game logic is another aspect that obscures the morality of the world of Pokemon, because how much of this aforementioned kindness would exist in the world if it didn't have to exist to make a decent RPG? All these factors make it a bit harder to judge the actions of any being in the Pokemon world, especially Pokemon, and that includes Necrozma. But I think I can say, even when we try to look at Necrozma's actions through the morality of the Pokemon world, the answer is just no. Necrozma's actions cannot be justified. There is no justification for destroying entire planets just because you're in pain. Even if Necrozma isn't thinking clearly, even if it's taking light from planets it originally gave it to, even if it feels bad for destroying planets, that doesn't really matter because it's just ending so much life. And this is sort of what I meant when it comes to the title of this video. When it comes to Necrozma, Pokemon fans seem to be split into two main groups. The fans who mashed A through the cutscenes of Alola and think Necrozma is just an evil monster who wants to destroy light for no reason other than its desire to do so, and the ones that think Necrozma stealing light is justified because it is not the Pokemon's fault that it needs to steal light in the first place, and that Necrozma is just a victim and not a perpetrator. But I kind of think both these groups are wrong. There's a lot of gray area between pure evil and pure victim. It's not a black and white situation, there's a spectrum that exists between these two options, and I believe that Necrozma's actions lie somewhere on this spectrum, kinda like the light spectrum. Seriously though, I think trying to act as if Necrozma is blameless in the devastation it caused is a bit disingenuous. It is in a unique position of suffering where the greed of others has caused the Pokemon great pain and suffering, and that pain and torment has, in turn, created exponentially more pain and suffering, not just for the untold lives it ended, but also for Solgaleo and Lunala. Like, Necrozma literally sticks its USB brain into their bodies and takes complete control of them. Sure, it's not nearly as bad as killing an entire planet, but there is something uniquely horrifying horrifying and disturbing about a legendary Pokemon losing its ability to control its own body? Do they still think while Necrozma is in control? Do their minds cease to exist too? The horrifying implications of Necrozma's actions are a part of why I believe it is not blameless in its treatment of the other members of the Sun Trio either. I wonder if the relationship between Necrozma and Solgaleo and Lunala is an unintentional analogy for bodily autonomy. Anyway, I'm rambling. One aspect of Necrozma's lore that I do find fascinating is actually what happens after it first appears in Alola. After it is fended off by the Tapos and crew, the ancient Alolan royal family orders the burning of all books related to Necrozma. They claim this was done to prevent the spread of panic about the Pokemon, but that doesn't sound right to me. Wouldn't it be a lot better to spread knowledge on this Pokemon so if it ever reappears, the people of the island would know what it is and potentially how to beat it? Maybe this is just me looking at this event through a modern lens, but to me, a government burning books to protect its people sounds more like an excuse to control information than anything else. It's just suspicious to me, but I doubt this is something we'll ever actually get answers on though, so let me know why you think the books on Necrozma were burned down below. And while you're down there, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed. I recently just made a hard pivot to Pokemon content like this video, and subscribing is the best way to tell YouTube that you enjoy this content, and that would really help out the channel at a time like now. Plus, I have a ton more Pokemon content like this coming out soon that I'm sure you wouldn't want to miss. So why not subscribe? There is, however, a bit of an issue with Necrozma's lore, which is that the director of Sun and Moon gave an interview that seems to conflict with the accounts we receive in the main game. Kazumasa Iwao said Necrozma is a Pokemon with a deep relationship to Solgaleo and Lunala. Necrozma itself cannot create light, but it can control it, so it has the desire to steal the light from Solgaleo and Lunala. This leads to an unending struggle between these three, as Necrozma steals light from one of them and then flees while the others try to take it back. According to him, this is how the Pokemon lived even before the Ultra Recon Squad permanently injured Necrozma. After being attacked by the people of Ultra Megalopolis, the way Necrozma interacted with Solgaleo and Lunala fundamentally changed, and now possessing them gives Necrozma too much energy, causing it to go berserk and transform into Ultra Necrozma. This kind of insinuates that Ultra Necrozma is not its true form, and is instead an additional transformation. But then, just a couple of seconds later, Iwao states that after Necrozma gets captured by the player and becomes its ally, it once again can draw on its full power, which kind of insinuates that Ultra Necrozma is its true form. But the interview also says in the same sentence that Necrozma should be able to draw upon this power without using Solgaleo or Lunala, which obviously is not the case in the game. In case you're wondering, this interview wasn't for some random website or something he said offhand. It was for the official National Pokedex of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, so it seems it's not just fans that don't fully understand Necrozma. Not even the creator of the game it's featured in seems to fully understand what they want to do with Necrozma as a character. I think two different things could be going on with this interview. First of all, it could just be poorly translated. There are a couple of sentences in this interview that feel very awkward and obviously conflict with the ideas present in the actual game. As far as I can tell, there is no official Japanese transcript available online, so unfortunately, it is impossible to tell if this is actually a translation issue or not. The other possibility is that Iwao is not actually talking about the plot of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, but rather his original vision for the games, which changed over time. I think there is a very high chance this could be the case as well. I find it very hard to believe that the director of a Pokemon game about Necrozma could have such a different interpretation of the Pokemon compared to what we see in the game. So this interview could be him explaining his original vision for the story of Necrozma rather than what the actual story was. There's also a possibility it's a combination of both of these ideas. Maybe this interview is Iwao explaining his original ideas for Necrozma, and it is also poorly translated. It's not like the data from the official guidebooks is always without issue. In a way though, this only adds to the fact that Necrozma is the most misunderstood Pokemon. If not even its creator is able to clearly define the Pokemon as a character, wonder, how is anyone supposed to fully understand it? Necrozma has been put in this position of existential ambiguity by both fans and Pokemon alike, and this is really only made worse by how it exists in Sword and Shield, where it cannot even fully transform despite having access to the Dawn Wings and Duskmane forms. It is so sad to see a Pokemon like Necrozma get shafted over and over again like this, and I really hope that if there is ever a Legends game set in Alola, that we get a clearer telling of Necrozma's story so it can finally get the clarity it deserves. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it and want more Pokemon content right now, I'm actually streaming a playthrough of Pokemon Coliseum live on Twitch. There will be a link to that down below. Thank you so much for watching as always. Be sure to subscribe if you're not already, and I'll see you next week for another video.